Hi, Stars fans. Stevens Sports Information Director Nicholas Petroni. On the seventh edition of Speaking with Stars, I'm joined today by Missourian sports editor Michael Knisley. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm good, and yourself?
Not too bad. My first question is, has your family been staying safe since the coronavirus outbreak pretty much shut everything down?
So far, so good. There have been some silver linings for us in that my two kids, who are both college age, one is just graduated, actually just finished up at University of Vermont in Burlington, and the other one is a sophomore at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California. So both coasts, and we're in the middle, and both their schools shut down like everybody else did. So we've had them here at home since early March, which has been a treat for me and my wife. So yes, we're so far so good. We're healthy, not getting around much anymore, but yeah, all good so far.
What was that communication process like with your student reporters since you weren't able to meet with them in person?
Uh, well, like everybody else in the world, I made myself very familiar with how Zoom works. We continued to meet once a week with the sports writers at the Missourian, only we did it virtually like this meeting is. Um, and, we had just grown to rely on emails and Slack and texts and Zoom and made it work that way. Um, I don't really think we ever ran into communication problems. I think we managed to stay in the kind of touch we needed to stay into. But I miss the personal touch. I miss seeing people. I mean, that's really the fun part of the job for me is just being around the reporters and the other editors. And so, yeah, I miss that a lot.
As an all-women's college, Stevens does a great job of promoting women's issues and women in the workplace in a variety of fields. Women in broadcast journalism, especially in sports, has been a growing field for the last couple of decades. What about the Missourian sports staff in terms of women is there, and like what roles do they have, and how do you think they've done a good job in that field?
It has been a challenge for me in the 2 years that I've been at the Mizzou J School to find the number of women sports journalists that I would like to have in the program. At the Missourian, we've managed to have 2 or 3 at most per semester. In our reporting classes, and that's not enough. I wish there were more. I have done as much as I can, I think, to reach out to people around the country, to the awesome chapter on the Missouri campus, to drum up support and make sure that everyone knows they're welcome in the sports discipline program at Mizzou. I don't feel like we're making the kind of progress just in terms of numbers that I'd like. There's still work to be done. And, once they're there, they're terrific, and they succeed, they thrive. I think it's a good, successful program. I just wish there were more of them.
For those watching this and meeting you for the first time, tell our viewers about your background before you got to the J School.
Well, before I came to the J School at Mizzou, I was, let's put it this way, I think this is what they would say in Hollywood. I was between movies. I had just finished up 13, 14, I'm not sure the exact number of years at ESPN in a number of different roles there. And before that, I had been a senior writer at the Sporting News, which was based out of St. Louis at the time, covering Major League Baseball. And before that, covering sports business and general assignment stuff. We can go back further in time. I was on the staff of the short-lived but glorious National Sports Daily. Lasted about a year and a half before we outspent our unlimited budget. And then came up in newspapers at the Denver Post, the Boulder Daily Camera.
With your extensive experience in the field of sports journalism, how have you seen the field evolve over the last couple of decades?
I think one of the ways to answer that question, Nick, is this, that I believe there have been a number of success stories to celebrate in sports journalism in the movement toward fan-centric content. I was at ESPN when Bill Simmons was writing for Page Two, and you have to be ancient like I am to remember Page Two at ESPN, but it was the site at ESPN.com for satire and humor commentary. And Bill Simmons, who had come to ESPN after he made a name for himself in Boston as the sports guy, the Boston sports guy. He just became the sports guy when he went national with ESPN. Brought a new perspective to presenting content. He was the first one to make it big, writing sports as a fan. Didn't hesitate to let his readers know what his sports biases were. He loved all the Boston sports. He loved the Red Sox, the Patriots, the Bruins, the Celtics. That's where he was from. That's what he grew up on. And so he made a name for himself as a fan of sports and a fan of certain teams. And that was always kind of a no-no in the conventional, traditional approach to sports journalism. And I think to answer your question about the evolution of the industry, I think from that point on, there has been a much greater place in the industry for that kind of content. Blogs, the growth of blogs, sports blogs, added to that because now you can make a name for yourself, develop a readership by presenting, creating, engaging content about your favorite team, and you will find a fan base who will follow you. So that's one area of evolution. Another, and this is not to be, I think this is important. There's been an explosion in women's sports. And so there consequently has been an explosion in coverage of women's sports, and that will only continue. Jobs to a certain extent are scarce in sports journalism just because of the economy, and it's very complicated, and most people know this already, but the internet has not quite figured out a business model for journalism yet. It's certainly sports journalism. They haven't figured out how to make it advertiser supported and financially feasible. Long story, but there are a number of new opportunities for sports journalists who are interested in covering women's sports just because of the growth of women's sports. So that's another area of evolution that I think is promising and encouraging. We're getting further and further away from print and closer to all digital and broadcast. And so that is another area of evolution. So, it's a changing business. It's something new every day. It's going to look a lot different 15 years from now than it does right now. And I'm anxious to see what we look like in the year 2035.
Specifically with women's sports, what have you seen in the evolution of either coverage or popularity?
Soccer has grown in this country. I'm not sure it's grown as quickly as people thought it would, because I remember When I was growing up in a small town in Ohio, soccer was going to be the next big thing. It was going to be a threat to football. And this was 50 years ago, 45 or 50 years ago. It didn't happen. But it's getting there. It's growing. So there is as you well know, there's incredible interest, not just in the soccer that's happening in this country, but because of in the last 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is, because of the exposure that the European leagues now get on television in this country. There's an incredible growth in the popularity of the Premier League and international soccer. So that's happening. That's going to continue to happen. We can see North American professional sports leagues expanding internationally. The NFL going to Europe, going to Mexico City, baseball going to the Far East. So we are looking at international games much more than we used to.
With the changing landscape of sports journalism, what were the things you stress to your reporters?
We tell our reporters to go look for the human stories.
Agreed. Yeah.
We are always looking for storytelling opportunities. We're always looking for ways to present a rounded look at an athlete. I think one of the issues in sports journalism in general is that we have tended to present athletes as one-dimensional, in some ways cartoon characters. If you look at the way Tiger Woods was portrayed, as an example, before he ran into the problems that he ran into, and then we all had to realize, hey, this guy, is a human being and he has human frailties just like the rest of us. But we only knew him as a golfer, so we only dealt with that one dimension of him. And I think it is, I think it's incumbent on sports journalists to find ways to humanize athletes much more than we do, and that's what we tell our reporters at the Missourian. So if they are coming to Stevens even if it's just to cover a soccer game or a basketball game where the outcome is important to the story, we would like them to find a feature angle. Mm-hmm. We would like them to find, star of the game or whoever was instrumental in the outcome, and not write so much about the win and the loss, but find out about that person and tell us about that person, and then make what happened in the game sort of a secondary element. That's what I think, especially in community journalism, which is what we do, that's what I think will engage our readership, our audience, much more so than, especially for a newspaper, which we are, we're obviously also a website. If you want to know who won the game, you can find that out pretty easily anywhere. But you might not be able to find out that starting point guard just got straight A's on a report card or something, the same day that she scored the winning basket. I'm spitballing here. I'm making that up as I go along. But that's the kind of thing that we ask our reporters to look for when they come out and do stories.